Okay, so when I first got into 40k, I did not know which faction to really pay attention to. Obviously, it would have been the Imperium, and the Space Marines were immediately the ones I was most drawn to. And funnily enough, that was the Iron Hands, which I still love the Iron Hands, but I watched Remlaze's intro to Space Marines and how they're made video, and I was just like, oh, the mechanical stuff with the tanks. Yeah, the Iron Hands seem really, really cool. And then I started doing research into them, and they're also really, really cool, but they were very different from what I initially thought that they were going to be. And since that point, I have developed a love for the Space Marines along with basically every single faction in Warhammer, because I've read so many books and listened to so many and watched so many lore videos that at this point I can puke. So, first among the chapters that are my favorite, Dark Angels. I liked them before Lionel Johnson came back, and I love them even more now with the lore revamp. I like them a lot because they overcompensate. They're the definition of overcompensating because they are trying so desperately hard to not reveal the fact that some of them fell during the heresy. But yet, I mean, everyone lost forces to the traitor legions. And I get that there's like a metaphor with it, but they're going so far out of their way to seem so super loyal that it's dreadfully obvious that something is up with them. I mean, keep in mind that Asmodai has been demoted from interrogator chaplain, like, what, 5 different times for being too harsh during his interrogations? I mean, I love the knight aesthetic. I love the fact that they have Dark Age of Technology check. They're really the first Legion. Hell, I'm pretty sure that they were the ones who purged the Thunder Warriors back during the Crusades during Old Night. But I love the Dark Angel. I love their shade of green. I love the fact that they have a diversified chapter, faction, whatever. With like, oh, there's a Green Wing, and then there's the Raven Wing, and then there's the Death Wing, obviously, which are awesome. Deathwing game is also really, really good, but that's besides the point. The Deathwing are super cool and are my favorite group of Terminators. I love Terminator units, by the way, and that was the main reason why I was initially drawn to the Dark Angels, but I stayed for the lore, to be honest. Up next is one that's going to get me crucified. I really like the Ultramarines. Like, a lot. A lot. And I think they're one of the better chapters in the lore. To be fair, Matt Ward was being a bit, shall we say, extra with some of his shenanigans involving their lore and the whole spiritual liege garbage. But let's not get into that. I like the Ultramarines because they're practical. Writing aside, Uriel Ventress and Titus are my favorites. I think that's a common thing. I think everyone likes Uriel Ventress and Titus, especially since he's coming back in Space Marine 2, which I'm very, very excited for. But I like the fact that they are the jack of all trades, master of none. They're good at everything. They're well organized. And in my opinion, Gilliman's the most practical and useful Primarch. Sure, the Lion, a Primarch that I love, by the way, and really should have been War Master in the first place, to be honest, can fight really, really well. Probably better than any of the other Primarchs. Maybe next to Angron. Even though Angron got his butt kicked in the latest Arcs of Omen book. So, hey, what do I know? I mean, Dorn can build nice walls. Perturabo can be sad, and so can Corvus Corax. And Fulgrim is extra, along with the rest of his Legion. But Gilliman has his own thing. He's practical. He's smart. He's the most realistic about all of them and actually has enough forethought to try to stop things. And that translates to the rest of the Ultramarines. To be fair, some of them are very, very pedantic, doing the whole, we will abide by the Codex Astartes, and blah, 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 and the book says so, and like the whole Leandros thing. That's annoying as hell. But everything else about the chapter is really cool, from the insignia to the Roman thing, to Gilliman just being a really cool Primarch, to the color blue. I just like the color blue. I really like the Ultramarines a lot. And they're a jack-of-all-trades army for a reason, and they've been kind of the poster boy since the mid-90s. I think before then it was like the Crimson Fist or the Blood Angels that were the really focal point chapter in the marketing. Hell, they got their own game on the 3DO of all things, which is really, really strange. But that's the side note of the Blood Angels. I'm on them. I mean, the Black Range is cool, but the fact that they're just little more than just Alucard from Castlevania, it's like, I get the Blood Angels are cool and all, and I love Sanguinius, but I'm on them, but that's besides the point. I really like the Ultramarines. I like how they work, and I like how they think and everything. I think they're really cool. I don't really have a lot to say about them. I just think they're neat. Oh boy. This next one. I love the Iron Warriors and the Luna Wolves. Not the Sons of Horus. The Luna Wolves and the Iron Warriors are probably tied for my favorite Space Marine chapters. Yes, they're both Traitor Legions, but when push comes to shove, I like really fast assaults or defensive siege warfare in my fiction. That is just what I like. That is always what I've liked. And to be honest, I just like Horus and Perturabo. Horus is so charismatic and likable and this very enticing character. And Perturabo is such a pedantic man-child that he goes full circle into being actually likable as a character. Because when I first started reading his books, I freaking hated him. He was so annoying, and he's like a Reddit mod. But then he's just like the only guy who can actually do anything, and him and Abaddon are the only people actually making the Siege of Terra actually work. So by the end of the Heresy, he's probably my favorite character. Well, I mean, there are other really good characters, Loken and Sigismund and a bunch of other different people. Dorn is also really, really good. I really like the way that the Iron Warriors are portrayed. That they're this very utilitarian, violent, oppressive, immovable wall of just death. While the Luna Wolves are this ultra-fast, pinpoint-accurate, lightning-focused group of warriors that are second to none in terms of assault. And, in my opinion, I like slow-grinding assaults. I like fast ones, too. I love the way both of them look. I like their Primarchs. I love these guys. These two and the Dark Angels are my favorite. I know that they're all first founding, and that's kind of basic, but I like what I like, and hey, they're really cool to me. Up next are the White Scars. The White Scars are really, really cool, because Jagatai Khan is probably the most unique Primarch, because he's not like Fulgrim, where he's constantly boasting. He's this somber, confident dude who's just like, I'm good at my stuff. If you want to try me, fine. But, you'll be face first in the toilet, bud. So, sorry about that. It's just, I like the Khan, I like the lore, I like the fact that it's all Chokorus and Genghis Khan basically in space. I like the bikes cavalry thing. They're just really, really neat. Also, they look fantastic. I like the color white as a primary color and then a highlight color. I just always like that. Maybe that's because I grew up with Star Wars and the Clone Troopers were just white with X color, but that's just something I've always really, really enjoyed. Back to the Iron Hands. I like the Iron Hands not because of Ferrus Manus. Ferrus Manus is a cool Primarch. I will give him that, but the issue is that there's nothing about him. He's just get more information about the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim than you do his own book. It's kind of bizarre. But the lore and everything else about them, about wanting to be more machine than man, and that robbing them of their actual combat ability, making this incredibly delusional and cold faction where it's not even considered that they'll rescue civilians. Because if you need to be saved, you weren't worth saving at all. This type of cold, violent mentality is very Iron Warriors in a lot of ways. I'm kind of shocked that they're so similar, but they're just really, really cool. I also like their focus on Dreadnoughts, because Dreadnoughts are like my favorite Space Marine thing, because it's just a box with legs with a half-dead guy in it with minigun strapped to it. That is awesome. It's just really, really cool to me. Up next is the Imperial Fists. I like the Fists about as much as I like any of the last few chapters that I've mentioned. I was originally much more into the Imperial Fists than the Iron Warriors, but once I started getting more into the Iron Warriors, specifically after reading a couple of the books I think it was Graham McNeil, I think, it really turned me over more to them than the Imperial Fists, and that's just more how they fight. I love Sigismund, and I love the Black Templars as well, because those guys are absolutely insane, because they're just screaming at the top of their lungs. But the Fists are great. I like the color yellow. I like Dorn. Dorn's an awesome Primarch. He is this very pragmatic individual. He's like Perturabo, but likable, and not an absolute man-child, and I like Dorn. I also really like TTS, so that's probably part of the reason why I like Dorn as much as I do. But just when I heard the description of how he was and how he behaved, especially now that I'm listening to the Siege of Terra book series, I'm just like, yep, there's a reason why Dorn is one of my favorite Primarchs. And I hope to God they bring him back. I really want them to bring Dorn back. Desperately. I know they're probably going to bring Jagatai back next, because if you have 3 Primarchs being like, I must save the Imperium, and I'm jaded, I mean, that's just kind of boring. Especially if they bring back Lehman, which I hope to God they do. I'm not the biggest Space Wolves fan. I like them more in 30k than I do 40k because the wolf thing is kind of a gimmick. I just wish they'd make them more Viking-like. Speaking of the Black Templars, I really like the Black Templars because they are basically Sisters of Battle, but Space Marines in a sense, because they're just religious nutcases. They don't follow the Codex Astartes. Well, technically they do, but they really don't. And I like the Crusader aesthetic. I like the black armor. Every single time I see them, just Sabaton starts playing in my head. So, I don't know. I really, really got into the Black Templars because I listened to the Dawn of Fire book that primarily focuses on them. I forget the name of it. But I listened to that, and I listened to the passage about how they killed their custodian that brought all their Primaris reinforcements. And I was just like, what? They can't just do that. I mean, that's a custodian for the Emperor. That's like, do you know how much trouble you in? You just can't do that. And once I started reading more about them, and I started reading a few comics about them, actually, and everything else, especially with reading the books about the Scouring involving Sigismund, I really grew to enjoy their different view of Space Marines compared to, like, the Ultramarines, who are more this secular type thing, where the Black Templars have faith. They believe that the Emperor is a god. They believe in this. They believe in that. They fight man to man, hard all the time. They are radical. They have this zeal that even Dorn shows multiple times. They are that radical part of Dorn's personality that I really, really like. I just love the Black Templars. I know this is a very general overview of a lot of the chapters, but this, I don't know, I just really like them a lot. Lastly, the Raptors. Actually, not lastly, there's actually one more after this, but the Raptors are really, really cool. The reason why I like the Raptors is just because they're just the canon version of the Reasonable Marines. They make sense. They're the same reason why I like the Ultramarines. They're pragmatic, they know what they're doing, they're more realistic, and they're more orthodoxy. I believe they're Raven Guard successors, but I just really, really like their concept in general. Also, that green is very Master Chief, and I don't know if that's intentional, but I like it. They're really, really cool. Lastly, the Word Bearers. The Word Bearers scare the hell out of me. And there's a reason why, because the Word Bearers and Lorgar and Erebus are the entire reason why the heresy happened. They are the antithesis of you being tempted by evil and seeking it out for yourself. You are not being summoned by the demons. You are summoning them. You are searching for their power. And if I've looked at any of their minis, specifically this one Dreadnought model, that's really, really cool, the Word Bearers just scare me. Also, the fact that Lorgar is hiding in a tower, hiding from Corvus Corax, just really funny to me. But the Word Bearers, especially the book The First Heretic, and everything involved with the burning of Monarchia, it sold me so much, because Lorgar is such a goober. He's such a doofus. He's this ineffectual combatant, but he's this masterful wordsmith, the likes of which Horus can't even match. He's this master manipulator, and his son, Erebus, exemplifies that in spades, and the fact that they're that dangerous, it freaks me out, because I want more of them. I want the Word Bearers to come back in a greater capacity, because I feel like that something cool could happen in the lore. And the main reason why I like them is just what they could do. Their presence. Also, the one guy from Dawn of War Dark Crusade is also really, really cool. That's part of the reason why I like them so much. Anyways, I said I had my own chapter that I made. This is that. The chapter name I settled on was the Tormentors. Yes, I know that there's a chapter already named that, but they have no lore, they have no insignia, and in my opinion, I'm just going to do my own thing with it. They're a chapter that I designed kind of to be like a partner or type of chapter that was kind of like the Death Watch, but for specifically Space Marines. But not in the way that the Grey Knights fight demons and stuff. This is specifically for Traitor Legion Space Marines, Renegade Marines, whatever. Thing is that's really, really cool about these is that they're primarily from Traitor Legion gene stock. They're created during the 8th founding, so they've been around for a while. And in my opinion, or at least in my lore, they've been a very formidable enemy against any Chaos forces. Specifically, they were used during the defenses of Cadia during the Black Crusades. They get this gene stock from Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, because Cawl has all the stuff, because if you read that one book where he's like, hey, we have all the gene stock from all the Traitor Legions, even the lost ones, we could use it, and Guilliman's like, no, don't use that. Well, I decided to use it as inspiration. So they're primarily pulling from not only various legions as recruits for this organization where they can volunteer to be transferred there and go through a series of testing, blah, 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 blah. The gene stock they primarily pull from are the Luna Wolves, Iron Warriors, Emperor's Children, and Death Guard. The reason why I settled on these 4 is because, per the lore, they seem to be the most stable out of all of them. And in my opinion, I feel like using lore justification as well as my own personal justification for the Chaos Legions that I really, really like, especially in terms of how they play in tabletop, I feel like it would be cool to throw some of those guys in there in particular. The chapter itself is Codex compliant only in its structure. It has around 2,400 Marines, roughly, and it does not have a traditional scout company. Because of the fact that it recruits from other chapters who can send their guys there if they want to do that, or if they're sent specifically via chapter masters themselves to do a specific thing, whether it's penance or just promotion, whatever, etc., etc. Each company within the chapter, of which there are 10, has their own scout training company within that company. And one person in that company is designed for training them for that specific company. The companies themselves almost serve as mini chapters, in the sense that they tend to work very differently. I've made a few characters for my chapter. The first being is Chapter Master Metron Aneliad. He has served for about 200 years and has personally led every single major engagement from the front line, despite the fact that his commanding officers and people behind him are protesting this because he has a penchant for trying to get himself killed constantly, whether he realizes it or not. And his lieutenants and captains have the unofficial job of stopping him from being impulsive in regards to his tactics. He's an aggressive and charismatic individual, and he is a Luna Wolves Space Marine genetic template person man thing. And because of these reckless tactics, he can spend several days in the medical bay after each engagement, suffering from injuries that are even grievous by Space Marine standards. The first captain of the 3rd Company, Marcius Seraphar, was a member of the Dark Angels, Ravenwing in particular, and his company prioritizes fast light assaults with light vehicles and air supports to get the job done. Seraphar in particular volunteered to become a member of the chapter and has excelled, but secretly feeds information on the Fallen back to Grandmaster Azrael himself. He is a quiet and calculating individual, but on the field of battle, he is absolutely zealotous, acting particularly violent towards his fallen brothers, which some of the other captains, specifically the captain of the 10th, has raised some concern about. Despite this, him and the chapter master are actually quite close, and they will often be seen eating together or just talking because they're particularly close friends. The first captain of the 4th Company is an Iron Warrior bred Marine by the name of Etros Maniclor. He is your archetypal Iron Warrior, but he's not bitter. He fights like an Iron Warrior, and he leads like one, but he always fights with a smile on his face. And he is just a very by-the-business type. He really likes his air support and skimmer raids, and he can often be at odds with the chapter master because of the fact that he takes more time with his assaults than the chapter master would like. But the results are often so good that if he ends up doing well, the chapter master completely overlooks this entirely. Lastly, the captain of the 10th Company, a Raven Guard 1st Company veteran by the name of Savexi Laris, who transferred to the chapter due to much prodding by the chapter master, has served with the Raven Guard for about 400 years, acting as an intelligence officer and trainee of Astartes for the Raven Guard. He does the same here for the 10th Company, and since his transfer, the effectiveness of the Tormentors has increased significantly. But unlike most Raven Guard, he actually smiles quite a bit and even has a sense of humor, albeit a dark one. And Seraphar tends to be confused at this, and while being a bit of a brick, he can appreciate the jokes once in a while. The relationships with the other chapters of the Inquisition are unknown. They're not adversarial, but they tend to work better with chapters that have a sizable portion of the chapter's population reigning from another one. For example, the entirety of the 6th Company, I'd say about 50% of them are Ultramarine successors, so whenever the 5th Company is sent out, they tend to work with the Ultramarine successors, because they tend to work really, really well together. By contrast, if you put an Iron Warriors dominant group, like the 4th Company, working with a bunch of Imperial Fists, despite the fact that they're both loyalists, there is bad blood there because they are not friends. They're a fleet-based chapter, they tend to work alone, and while they tend to return to Terra for recuperation, this only happens once every few years. Currently, they are receiving Primaris reinforcements under Gilliman's nose via call, and have last been spotted during the Indomitus Crusade fighting during the Plague Wars against Nurgle's forces. That's my chapter. I know it's kind of basic, but I think it's pretty cool. Anyways, that is the video. The Black Ops 2 video is coming soon. There will be a couple videos in between now and then to tide you all over, but that is getting worked on. Have a good one.